It's no secret for anybody nowadays that the modern education system, which has its roots all the way back in 1870s Germany, the birth of industrialization, that this system really leaves much to be desired. And as we've talked about on numerous occasions throughout this podcast with both Steve and I, as well as some other guests, education in the modern world today is, well, a giant question mark. And I don't know, you dear viewer, how your schooling went through, but from what I remember, we got there early in the morning, the bell rang, and I sat down in classes for little periods of maybe 45, 50 minutes each and got a 2-second break in between. But every time the bell would ring, it would signal one cycle is over, time to begin the next one. By the time I got home, I was so burnt that I had no real ability to think outside the box or do anything that I truly wanted to do. Rather, I had more work and more work and more work. By the end of the day, when the sun was down, and that was it. So, Podclass Pro was born as a reaction to the modern education system, which is building a surf class. Ultimately, just the perfect factory worker, the perfect soldier, the perfect servant. My name is John Lewandowski. I'm the founder and CEO of Podclass Pro. And looking for my lessons back in the day, I've realized things need to change. Today, I'm joined by Podclass Steve, our wonderful co-host, who, well, you guys know our story. We go back and we've experienced the horrors of the education system over the last 4 to 5 years since the world shut down. And today, we are joined by a wonderful guest named David Hamilton. He is the founder and CEO of America Future Series, and he's here to talk about entrepreneurship and a little dosage of education. And David, before the call, you're just briefly mentioning how you had gone through 11 different schools. So what's the takeaway from it?
Sure, thank you. I come from a military family, and my father left when I was very young. We were 8, and because of that, we ended up doing a certain amount of migrant farm work and moving around the South a lot. And by the time I got to the 10th grade, I'd gone to 11 schools, all public schools. And there were a few great teachers that sort of took me under the wing and were very helpful, et cetera. But by and large, it was a survival exercise. Like you said, getting through each day, the 45-minute, 50-minute sessions, which were directed by the teacher, right? That method is you will come and learn what we want you to learn, et cetera. Not sort of the Montessori notion, which is maybe you learn what you want to learn at your pace, et cetera, and what you're most focused on. And Most of the teachers were people that couldn't really survive outside the warm confines of academia, working for still in school. They'd never gotten out of school. They'd never had a job. They'd never done that sort of anything else other than teach or be in a school. And I would say that that is not necessarily the ideal candidate that you want to have teach your child. If you want your child to learn about life and be successful, et cetera, you might want to have them hang around successful people. My mother was a school teacher. I love school teachers, et cetera. I even thought about teaching in retirement. I substituted probably 15 times in the local area here, everything from special needs to coaching to advanced placement, et cetera. I was so burned out by the end of the day as a substitute, I couldn't see myself doing it. I would have killed someone by the end of my third day, I think. I don't think I'd have made it. Um, so then it's funny that the system did work for me. I was good at school, and I have 3 degrees. I got an MBA from the University of Texas at Austin, a geology degree, an undergrad in business, et cetera. And I ended up working for Accenture and other consulting firms, where oddly enough we studied adult learning characteristics. I worked for change management services, and we did a lot of training, et cetera. It was really interesting to me that they called them adult learning characteristics. I mean, they're just learning characteristics or interests, right? I don't care if you're 30 or if you're 13, you probably want the same things. Whatever you're learning has to be relevant and germane. Ideally, you have some interest in it. Perhaps you get to study sort of at your pace and how you want. So it was funny. We were teaching corporations how to design training to be as effective as possible, education for their employees. I'm saying, why wouldn't we consider these things for young people? Young people don't like to get up in the morning. They really don't. And their biological clock is set for them to not really be able to function until 10, right? And if you make them get up at 7:30 or 8, et cetera, that's not when they're at their best, right? And they actually, you guys are probably examples of this. When you're young, you're a night owl. You probably wouldn't mind setting at 6 or 7 or 8 o'clock in the evening, right? I have one boy that would literally, a 25-year-old son who would be a vampire if possible. He would hang by his toes during the day and then wake up at the crack of sunset and be up all night. But he's got a corporate job, and so he works 9 to 5 or whatever, eight to 6 or whatever, those kind of things. But we don't adjust for that, and our system is broken. I think most people would acknowledge that no one in the world from another country, another developed country, or even a second world country would say, I really want to go to K through 12 in America. That's the epitome of K through 12. Let's go. I grew up in Oklahoma, Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Texas, et cetera. Oh yeah, I want to go, especially in some of the poor areas that I lived in. Yeah, I really want to go to one of those schools, right? But they do want to come to our universities. Well, why? What's the fundamental difference? Well, the fundamental difference is, one, there's choice. Two, there's competition. Three, there's a whole lot of money we're going to give you loans at the wazoo so that you can go into debt, right, and be crushed by that. But people compete to go to the very best schools, et cetera, in part because the schooling is good, but also to be around other great students. Let's be honest, the classes that they teach at Harvard versus Stanford versus UT Austin, or maybe even Cullen County Community College, it's the same content. And then lastly, I'd say this, and we can go other places from this, but if you're not educated in America today or any of the developed world, it's because you don't want to be. Because you don't need to go to college to get the education you want. You could be a lifetime learner. You can learn from podcasts, from the programs that you have. There's 1,000 sources, right? Even the major universities provide free content if you want it, right? And we have this friend, Rudred Lynch, who's only 22 years old, but he's incredibly learned because he wanted to learn and he reads voraciously, et cetera. So those kinds of people are going to be successful despite the educational system. And I think most people are successful, especially if they're entrepreneurial. Nothing in our schooling taught us to be entrepreneurial, take risks, et cetera. I have a 20-year-old son who, oddly enough, when he was about 10, became an entrepreneur. He started selling tennis shoes that he would buy off the internet and resell, et cetera, right? They would drop. Okay. And he was making good money. He said 10, he was making 1,000 a month doing this, right?
Wow.
And so why don't you get your friends to do this? He goes, are you crazy, Dad? My friends are going to invest their money, work this hard, et cetera, as I do. And I go, so welcome to capitalism and welcome to being an entrepreneur. But he figured out, like by 11, he figured out, no, not everyone's cut out for this. And we need a system that is built to nurture people who want to be entrepreneurial, people who want to be in the trades, people who want to go on to get a white collar job or whatever, or be in academia. Those tracks need to be better developed, and those options have to be better figured out because we have fallen so far behind our other countries, et cetera, that it's embarrassing. I mean, most of our kids are illiterate. I mean, 70% of African American kids in the state of California cannot functionally read.
Wow.
I
And we
mean,
purport to have the best education system, the
yes.
most effective,
And
right?
of course, the answer is to spend more money on it. If we just spent more money and had a nicer building, that would fix the problem, right?
Just dumping piles and piles of cash onto something magically does not really make it better.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we don't live in the world where just writing a check will magically raise literacy rates, test scores, and I grew up during that time where there was a major push by the U.S. federal government through the No Child Left Behind that, well, ultimately all people cared about were, oh, test scores, and if your
And
school
have
does
a smoking
better,
test. I
that's
mean,
it.
my younger brother got through the University of Nebraska with a C plus average, never going to class because he took every course he took, every class he took, he made sure they were multiple choice tests. And he was
That's a
very
smart way.
adept at taking multiple choice tests, et cetera, right? Military has a term called Charlie out. If you don't know the answer, pick C, Charlie out, right? He figured all these things out and he knew that he could study really hard and maybe get a B. Or he could not study at all and get a C plus.
Hey, whatever works. There's three types of people that we've noticed, and Podclass Pro wants to go for the number one there. The three types are there's people that make things happen, which sounds like the individual just described, to there's people that watch what's happening, and then there's people that just, well, think about, well, what happened.
Mhm.
And at the end of the day, as we were talking about, we want to be entrepreneurs. We want people around us to be entrepreneurs and to hang out with those kinds of successful people. But unfortunately, the people that seem to be in charge of getting our kids up to that, imagined level are not those that did that. I had many wonderful teachers, but I had many teachers that remained cogs in the machine. Their purpose there in school was to, well, build more of those cogs in the machine. Or the Podclass Pro says no to that. We want people to be surrounded by successful people. We want people to be surrounded by those that they could make global connections with. What Podclass Pro is about is building those bridges between different people groups, societies, and areas around the world.
But what I like about your business model is that you're trying to fulfill a need. Every good entrepreneur sees a problem, tries to come up with a solution. And you've identified people as wanting to develop themselves and want to succeed. And they recognize that learning a language or some other skill makes them more valuable, makes them more competitive, et cetera. And they're willing to invest their time, energy, and effort to do that. But they want to do it in the most effective way possible, right?
Absolutely.
So I never took a Spanish course, but I speak Spanish because I was a fighter, I was a boxer, and I was the only Anglo in all Hispanic neighborhoods, right? And I know all part of the expression. I know all the phrases for "kill the white man." I mean, you need to know that in every language, right? So I learned Spanish, and I speak Spanish. I have a friend who has an associate's degree in Spanish, who speaks no Spanish, right? And so he got through high school and 2 years of JUCO or whatever, and really can't speak any Spanish. Well, I lose it myself when I don't use it, right? But if I go to Mexico, if I spend a couple of weeks around people immersed, which is what you guys do, right? In real life conversation, as opposed to reading from a book, ¿Dónde está la casa de Pepe? Right? ¿Dónde está la biblioteca? Right? And rinse and repeating that, doing it in real life. Boxing works that way. I was a pretty good boxer, and you can hit the bag, but the bag don't hit back. And you need to get in the ring with somebody and you need to have a conversation with them and engage and have a reason. I mean, if you need to go to the restroom, you will figure out how to say to communicate to somebody, where's the restroom? If you're thirsty enough, you'll figure out how to say cerveza because you care, right? What your system does, which I appreciate, is people who care about it get to work with other people, talk in real time about things that they care about, et cetera, and learn a language in as close to a native way as possible. And that's an example of how education has to be designed to fit the needs of the person trying to learn. One, they have to want to, they need to have a need. Otherwise, they're just being told, when was the last time we solved for X, right? When was the time we solved for an area under a curve using calculus? We were forced to do that, and we've never used it since, and we can't remember how. But your program, I think, is the answer to how to do this and how people can learn and retain it. Because if you don't use it, you will lose.
I found my calculator actually right next to me from school from complex algebra. Somewhere in the desk.
It's somewhere down there. Yeah.
Somewhere down there. I found it yesterday when I was doing some winter cleaning. To be honest, I'm not really sure when I'll ever use that again. It was a nice find. I think maybe Steve can relate as well, since we were in the same schooling kind of system here in the state of New York. When was the last time you did complex geometry, Steve?
When I took geometry in ninth grade.
Exactly. And I remember many sleepless nights studying for these tests, doing the homework assignments, and well, what did we gain from it? I don't know.
It would have been fine, I think, for you guys to learn that, Steve. I think you probably would agree that it would have been okay for you to learn that if it was something that we exposed you to. You decided if you were interested in it, et cetera, and you chose a path where that was needed.
Yeah, I completely agree.
But we make everybody take it, right?
Yeah, and there are always kids in class who were terrible at it, I remember. And I wasn't bad, but I wasn't good either. But the kids who were really bad struggled and they were unhappy. And then why should their inability to do geometry affect their GPA when they're very brilliant in other areas, right? Like Rudyard said, he's great at history, but not so much as math, if I believe I remember correctly. And it's like the same thing where we are falsely and inappropriately applying the wrong curriculums universally, if that makes any sense.
we're trying to force everyone to be okay at everything.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you another time, because I was told to work on my weaknesses. You need to fix this, etc. I said, well, why shouldn't I play to my strengths? I'm 5'9", 200 pounds, right? I've tried to play college football, not very good, right? Boxing, I go against another 5'9" guy. I was 160 at the time, another 5'9", 160. Why wouldn't I do that? I'm not going
Yeah.
to play basketball. Making people try to do complex stats or geometry, et cetera, is the same as trying to make me into an NBA basketball player.
Yeah. You can't make a fish climb a tree, but he's damn good at swimming.
Yeah. So why not make him a better swimmer, right?
Exactly.
And so there's this entire discussion about African Americans excelling at sports, right? Jimmy the
Hmm.
Great talked about it many years ago, got canceled about that, et cetera. Um, one of the things that was brought up was it's really how much time you spend. It's not whether you're just gifted physically or not, right? That's one element. But I'm trying to remember who the person was. It was a leader. I think it was Obama. Someone said something along the lines that the average African American kid spends about 2 to 3 hours on some sort of sport during the day, and maybe 45 minutes or so on school after school. And then Anglos spend about an hour and 15 minutes on each. And then Asian students spend 3 or 4 hours on school and maybe 45 minutes on sports. Okay, well, why is that? Let's say that's true. Why is that? Well, is it because they're being forced to or whatever? If you're good at something and you enjoy it, you're probably going to gravitate towards doing that, right? Now, and now, if a lot of the Asian culture, does focus on formal school, et cetera, you're probably going to be forced to, even if you don't want to. I get that, right? But people tend to we do things for a reason. We do what we want to do for a reason. And if we're getting kudos for it, if we're getting positive strokes, we're going to want to do more of that, right? If you're
Yeah.
not good at sports, if you're the fat kid at trying to climb the rope in gym class, you're not, and you're failing in front of God and everybody over and over again. Your college, or I'm sorry, your elementary experience is going to be really bad, and you're going to feel bad about yourself. So we actively make people feel bad about themselves, right? By forcing them to do things that they're not good at. And then we wonder why people who are really good at something say, oh, I think I'll do more of that. It's common sense. So we do need to change our system. The only way that I can think to fix that is entrepreneurism, is the free market system. If I have a kid who's gifted at something, I should probably take them to a school that will help them develop that gift.
Hmm.
Right? If they're athletically inclined, et cetera, and they want to go that 1/10 of 1% chance of making it rich by being an athlete, okay, great. That's their choice, right? Very few people make that, right? But if they want to be, forcing people to get the classic education as opposed to maybe becoming an electrician, right, or a master plumber or thing like that, which pays really well, we don't have enough of, right? Um, Forcing them to do that doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. And because the system tells everybody what to take as opposed to the customer, you wouldn't go to a restaurant and they say, you need to have the salmon, right? They would say, what can I get you? What would you want, right? And if that restaurant tried to force the salmon on you, you'd go, I'm going to go to another restaurant. So why don't we give choice? And I'm a huge fan of choice. I don't want to kill the public school systems. I don't want to do that at all. I just want someone to be able to pick and go to the public schools that they want to, and they have a voucher to go do that. And if they can go to a public school that is doing a better job than the others, and perhaps we even kill the bottom 10%. I was shot, stabbed, beaten up in school. One guy showed up to come to a fight that I was supposed to have with him, that somebody killed him before he got to him. Okay. And I was 13 years old.
Wow.
Why am I, if my mom could have got me out of that school, she would have wanted to, right? We have schools that are basically breeding grounds, training grounds for bad behavior. And then it's funny, people make fun of homeschooling, and I go, homeschooling means that kids are around adults and they end up learning adult behavior. People say, oh no, they need to be around other kids. So what? So they can act like juveniles? Have you seen, you remember your childhood? Those kids were mean.
I was nuts.
And what's that?
I was nuts. I was off the walls for a while, and
Yeah,
Yeah.
dude.
that's just like,
So these kids who get homeschooled, who spend more time, who a get to pick what they want to talk about and what they learn about, et cetera, spend less time, less hours per day in school, and have more time to do other things. Secondly, they are more mature, and universities are now looking at them as better options. They're giving them preferential treatment if you're homeschooled because they figure, yeah, you probably figured out, no, probably not going to drink as much, getting this, fights and this kind of stuff. You're more mature. And that's not true for everybody. I do like to say that generalizations work generally, right? Generally speaking, that these things are true. But generally speaking, um, the average school is average, and they can survive being average because the customer has no choice. They can't up and leave and take their money with them. And if they could, and somebody wanted to take their kid, and God forbid, it was a Christian school or a Jewish school or a Hindu school or whatever, I don't think that would be the end of the world. What I think is the end of the world is if Johnny and Sally can't read or write, and if they can't perform. That is that thing. So
Yeah.
let's give people some choice. Let's give them some money. It's the same about bottom. Or I tell you what, give them less money. Let's say the average amount we're spending on a child in Texas schools is $5,000 a year. You want to go, you want to pick, you get 2,500. Take your $2,500 voucher, figure out the difference, et cetera, right? If you want to do it that way. Or simply say to the bottom 10% of all schools, it's only those kids. If those schools are performing the worst, it's the kids at those schools where their families get a voucher to take them to a better school. If we really care about education, et cetera, we don't keep doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results, right? You don't have to
absolutely.
be Einstein to know that one, even though he said it, right? So let's let the bottom 10% or so, and then the next year, let's reevaluate. Say, okay, how did they do? How did those kids do? Let's follow the math. We're going to teach people math. Let's use that math, okay? If kids are doing better at other schools, and I know this is a teachers union issue, right? We want to control our school system. We want as many teachers as possible, et cetera. I get that. But somebody has to be the adult. And somebody has to say that these schools aren't working, and America as a nation, as a society, is failing and falling behind. We don't have people who as an employer, I can't hire people that have the skills that I need in order for them to be able to perform, to fit those factory worker type jobs or those middle management jobs, etc. We don't have them. They don't
Yeah.
certainly don't have the critical thinking skill.
I think Elon Musk was saying something about that. So, in Texas too. That's where he's operated. Like recently, within the last month, he said that recent grads don't have the skills or the drive. More importantly, that kind of spirit that of innovation that you really want and look for when you're hiring. They don't have it, and the schools kind of stamped it out of them and taught them to obey, taught them to do drills, and that's
It's
it.
the,
And
it's the tyranny of low expectations. The
the
expectations
tyranny
are
of
really low, right?
yeah,
And I am a curmudgeon. I'm a get off my lawn kind of guy. Grew up really dirt poor. Put myself through high school, college, grad school. But my great aunts, I had two great aunts who had it way harder than me. One was a single woman at 18 years old. She was a school teacher in Oklahoma and went to Alaska, got a mule, went up into the Yukon, and panned for gold as a single woman in 1880. Right? Her sister did the Oklahoma land rush as a single woman. She got a covered wagon and a team of horses, and she did the race, and she got her acres, and she plowed that ground, and she settled, et cetera. And when they turned 80, the two of them moved in together to support each other. They'd lived on their own. They're both spinsters, had never gotten married, never had kids, but they lived on their own until they were 80, had never had indoor plumbing, built a house in Purcell, Oklahoma by hand at 80 that I was sitting in when I was 10 years old. Being upset because we were homeless at the time, right? My mom wanted me to meet these two ladies, all 5'2" of them, right? 125 pounds, who had never seen a doctor in their lives. And they both lived to be over 100. So every generation before us, if you go back to Rome or whatever, if you go back far enough, it was tougher. It just wasn't. Tough times create tough people, right? There's that whole tough time, and soft times create soft people, et cetera, that kind of stuff. Now, what's interesting is I had a conversation with my 25-year-old son, who's very hardworking, very smart, has a very great job, worked through college, is a master mechanic he's a certified mechanic with Toyota, Ford, BMW, build that 16, 17-year-old, he's building his own race cars and stuff like that. I mean, this is a sharp, hard-brained kid, but he focuses on what he wants to focus on, right? So I've got this little tiny ranch, and we're working on outside, and I'm busting my butt a little harder than him. And he turns to me and he goes, "Dad, you understand I'm second generation money, right? I didn't grow up homeless, poor like you did. I'm never going to work as hard as you, unless I have to. And I don't view being a hard worker as some sort of innate virtue. There's a problem with the older generation when they kind of look down at the younger generation and said, when I was your age, we had it rough and we went uphill both ways to school and all that crap, right? You know, young people get tired of hearing that shit, right? Okay. So, but I'm very proud of my son because he understands that, look, just it's not innately, someone's not innately better because they're a really hard worker, right? He goes, I'm not going to waste my energy on things that don't matter, but I will apply myself like hell really hard for things that I do care about, right? So it's funny, you can learn from anybody. I learned from my son that, and my son taught me that, right? My younger brother taught me, hey, you can learn from stupid people, Dave. You can learn from anybody, right? If we're continuing, you can learn what to do, what not to do. I mean, hopefully my two boys have learned what not to do, looking at daddy, right? And I asked them, your job is to be better than your daddy, right? And I said, I didn't set the bar too high, so you're good. You're all good, right? But it's interesting. I think we have to come to grips with the fact that, yes, this generation is ill prepared and is softer than the last generation. And that generation before it and before mine, et cetera, were tougher because they had to be. Well, times are getting tough. And if times were really tough, these kids today, they're perfectly capable. They have it in them to rise to the occasion. It'll happen because it has to happen. Because they'll have to do it, right? You know, there's a reason why there's coaches, right? We push ourselves, you know, some people push themselves pretty hard, but most people need a coach to get the most out of them, right? And our school system, we're enabling people in the workforce. We're telling people they don't have to show up on time. They don't have to have an agenda for a meeting. Statistics are bad. Merit is bad. You know, we have to change this. Eventually, if America as a nation and as a society falls by the wayside more and more and more, at some point, I'd like to think there will be a tipping point. People will say, no, you do need to work hard. You do need to study. You do need to try. And those people who put out the effort and get results deserve to get remunerated more than others, right? And the classic question always in school is, well, if you want to be fair and have equal outcome and all this kind of stuff, would you give your A when you studied really hard to a kid who's getting a B? And no student would do that. I worked really hard for this, so I want my A, right?
Absolutely.
That psychology, that value system has to change. And anybody who wants to succeed in this world needs to do what the two of you guys have done. I'm looking at two young men who studied hard, et cetera, and are taking money out of their pocket and their time and investing in something. And for anyone to act like you don't deserve whatever comes from that and that you somehow fell to the top of the mountain, that's BS, right? And when I hear this, and I'm a former classic liberal socialist, follower of Alinsky, civil rights activist, right? I have a little bit of a socialist bent to me, right? But when I hear people talk that way, I go, no, people who invest, people who write on the fronts of checks as opposed to sign the backs of checks. If you've never signed the front of a check, you don't know what it's like to stay up at night worrying about whether your employees are going to have a job tomorrow. You didn't invest your life savings in it, and you don't have everything at risk. And you don't get paid last. You get paid first if you're signing the back of the check. People need to grow up. Young people today need to grow up. Older people who are enabling this stuff, they need to grow up. We're competing not with just each other. We're competing with the entire world. And I've told my sons, you're not competing with little Johnny or Sally in your classroom. You're competing with the kid in India and China, et cetera, who wake up hungry every day and are driven to succeed. I'm sorry to preach, but what you guys are doing is important. You're giving people an opportunity. I have been an executive recruiter, and when I could see that somebody could speak a language that somebody else couldn't speak, that was sometimes the deciding factor. And if I knew how they learned, if Me personally, if I knew that somebody had gotten a 3.8 or 3.5, but had worked 40 hours a week, I tended to value that more than a 4.0. Right. I think I think there's some validity to that. You guys provide a program, a system where you connect people who want to learn with those who want to teach, and they want to do it the most effective way possible because it will be an advantage for them in their lives. I mean, even just with a girl, if you can speak French or Italian or Spanish, you've
A lot
opened up
more doors open up to you.
yeah, the Oculus is bigger, right? So anyway, that's my little preaching. I appreciate you giving me a chance to share some of those ideas.
Yeah. Well, we've come to the end of our time, everybody. Well, thank you, David, for joining us today, and thank you for the support. We truly appreciate that, as well as your guidance, and of course, joining us as well. It was a good conversation. Steve, any final closing thoughts on education in today's world?
Only that the education of today's world needs to soon become the education of tomorrow, and we're in that middle phase right now. And whatever
I agree.
gets implanted for the rest of the century, that's what will be remembered, right? No one
Well,
remembers how kids went to school in the 1910s, but once the high school system came around, that's what the 20th century is known for. Now it's time for what's next, you know.
exactly.
So we'll
Big
see.
education is, well, outdated
Yeah.
by the end of, well, hopefully 2024. So 2024 is going to be the year of Podclass Pro, and we'll finally see a step in the right direction towards building an education, building a life for people, and of course, unlocking new doors, expanding your horizons, expanding your reach, and hey, one day I want everyone that comes to our program to be living a life that someone will want to make a movie about. And that's simply what it is. We want people to be entrepreneurs. We want people to be more than what most teachers wanted them to be. And one thing that's always stuck out to me, there were many teachers who preached the rules and conformity. There was a few of them that were a bit more lax. Maybe they gave an open book, but there was a hand few that really reached out and I believe wanted me to reach my full potential. And to those few, I'm sure many of you have those in your life. We want to give a big thank you to them. And Podclass Pro is meant to honor that legacy. So, without further ado, everyone, don't be like Big Education. Book your first pod class instead. You can find us at www.podclasspro.com, as well as on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And yeah, my friends, once again, thank you, David, for joining us. See you all next time. Have a great
Thanks
day.
for having me.
Bye now.